Give us their perspective on the Germany, Visegrad, and the future of EU economy and economic governance, which each of these words would be supposed to be one of the seminars. So we are trying to put them together. We start with a short presentations or short remarks from each of the panelists at the beginning, and then with, I hope, lively discussion. I'm Martin L. from Czech economic daily Hospodářské noviny. On my right is Matthias Schäfer, head of team of economic policy in Konrad Adenauer Stiftung from Berlin. On my left is Zoltán Pogatsa from University of Western Hungary. He's professor of economics covering Central European economies for the last couple of decades. We are not too old. And on my further left is Zdeněk Kudrna, a Czech researcher who is currently based in Vienna and University of Salzburg in Austria. So he has a little bit different perspective than we all together. So I think we have nice Central European panel. So maybe I would ask Matthias to start with his remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Yil. Thanks for having me here. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here in Prague and to debate with you about the perspectives of, as you said, the four countries and Germany in the background of the upcoming economic policies and economic governance. What I would like to outline in the beginning is some four ideas which more or less are the background of the German economy in a way of seeing whether this can bridge to the perspectives of the Visegrad countries concerning the economic policies on the one hand between our countries, on the other hand as well within the European Union's economic governance. First of all, I would like, as I said, I would like to speak about four factors of, from a German point of view, elements of economic success that have been proven in a way as well in the development of the German economy in the last decades even. So the first one, I mean actually probably everyone is, for instance, identifying Germany with the master of austerity in the European Union. So I will start with this, speaking in the beginning about a notion which is from my point of view more precise in a way, which means what is the role of public finance, is public and what is the meaning of sound public finance for the overall achievement of an economy. And I think our lesson in Germany and what we would like to bring as well into the debate is that it's one of the fundamentals of economic success from a political point of view. When you have a look in the legislations, the laws, the code of laws in Germany, you will never ever find one single word which is linked to austerity. You don't find this word in the German law. Nevertheless, everyone is speaking about austerity. What it means is, and this is the question I think that an economic policy and the government has to find answers to, is the underlying question behind this point is, can we afford what we spend in the long term? I mean, this is the overall question which is underlying, in my point of view, this debate of sound public finance as a fundament of economic and as well, from my point of view, social power. And I want to outline that actually this is a core principle which now has been can be seen as well in all these reforms we have taken in the Eurozone in the last years concerning fiscal compact and more measures and instruments of balancing out a public budget. The main question I would like to underline is, can we afford what we spend? The second pillar of a German perspective on economic issues and economic governance for sure is the fact that we need for our prosperity the competitiveness of our corporate sector, and therefore we do have this experience of having an economic structure which is directly linking to small and mid-sized companies more than to big corporates. If you have a look at The Economist of this week, you can see the biggest companies, the 10 biggest companies per following the market capitalization compared the last decade, 2006 to 2016. I mean, 3 of them, which are now in the top 10, have been in the top 10 10 years ago. You will never find one single German company within this. So the German structure is more linked to these so-called hidden champions, not the known champions that everyone knows, the tech companies, for instance, but the hidden champions. And from our point of view, this is as well something to debate in a discussion between Visegrad countries and Germany, as well as I think that the link between our economies, between Germany and the 4 countries, Visegrad countries, shows actually that this steep separation or labor, this link in our export industries shows up that actually our small and mid-sized companies do profit in this globalized economy, in this globalized world, from the fact that they are small companies which are quite successful in some special parts of their business models, but and they have a global success whether nobody knows them. And this is, from my point of view, as well something we should put on the table as one key factor of economic success in Germany. Sound public finance, the first, the second, the role of the small and mid-sized companies, their role for innovation of our business models. The third point, I think as well, a very important point coming from a political point of view, is the role of open markets between our companies. Thereby we speak about instruments and policies like TTIP and CETA, TISA, all these agreements we want to finalize in these months and years between the European Union and the United States. I do think that actually thereby we can find much common ground in having a look at our economic policies between Visegrad countries and Germany, that we both are orientated towards open access, open markets, and thereby create new business models, new wealth and new jobs for our people. So, I mean, the previous panel spoke already about the trends in the security model, where we see a certain importance of the fact who will be the next president in the United States. I mean, this does not only reflect towards security problems, but as well to economic perspectives, because actually there is the choice, from my point of view, between, on the one hand, more open markets, more globalization on the one hand, or the contrast, do we get in a situation where regionalization or even nationalization of our economies will become the next trend? And there is as well a political choice to do. I think that the European Union, and especially our economies, profited deeply from open markets and the reduction of hurdles and barriers to start businesses. So this is the third pillar of economic success. I would like to speak, I wanted to speak about this open markets idea. And the fourth one, which is quite as well a very, very strong political point of view, is how can we, when we see that there are very, very successful companies, that there is sound public finance, that there is a trend in which our companies profit from open markets, how can we in a way pave the way towards the fact that the people in our countries do profit from the created wealth? I think that this is as well something which directly is linked to the social balance and the fact that we should achieve in a way a situation in which not only a part of our public a part of our society is profiting from the fruits of economic development and the globalized world, but there is that we can spread it in a vast idea that more or less everyone can profit from these fruits of globalization. I think this backlash of nationalization in certain countries has as well to do with the fact that the governance of the economic policies, not only in the European Union, didn't pay enough attention to the question people raise: what do I have from globalization? What is my personal interest in it? And how can my job, my perspective of income improve when our economies do, in a way, integrate even more and more in a globalized world? So therefore we need as well a better idea of how to address the social aspects of a competitive economy in our countries. Last remark, because the Brexit was as well raised in the security panel, I think that actually behind this Brexit development and this camp of Brexiteers stand some fundamental questions that member states want to see, people in member states want to see and realize and understand better and more of what is the profit we can get from the European Union. And I think as well that there has been a lack of understanding, of communication, of better, of having more sensitivity towards the wishes of our people in our home countries. And I think with the fact that Brexit will be Brexit, we didn't resolve this problem. And it will be at stake still in the European Union of 27, and we still have to find answers to these questions that have been raised in this environment of the Brexit debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would have immediately first question before Zoltán organize himself. I was on the different panel previously on the Czech-Polish strategic relationship, and there was a talk about a Visegrad model giving kind of a new ideas or kicks to European Union in the future. Because you mentioned it in your last point, do you think that let's say, in economic field, we have, as a Visegrad, something to offer, to think about for you?
Thank you very much. Absolutely, you have. Actually, when we have a look at, as well, from my point of view, the academic field, we always had the debate about 4 archetypes of social models in the European Union. The Nordic model, the continental model, which was Germany and France with, the Mediterranean model, and the Anglo-Saxon model. What we, from my point of view, deeply need, and in a way lack as well, would be what is the Eastern European perspective towards, could there be a 5th, for example, model of social model and economic model of our welfare states, or are Visegrad countries, and this is what was my starting point of my presentation, is there a bridging towards principles that German economic model in a way follows, or is there I would like to have an open debate about what is your perspective of, because we had as well in the security panel this debate about France and Germany and the UK, but this is 50 years old, and from this point of view a new stimulus is, from my point of view, warmly welcome as well towards the fact of how to improve or to reform our economic and social models within the European Union's governance.
Thank you. Zoltán, do we have this model to offer?
Okay, I'm going to come to that, but let me start with sound public finance, because I think everybody agrees that sound public finance is the foundation for an economy. The only thing we debate is what exactly sound public finance means, and sound public finance does not mean austerity. It does not mean underinvestment, and the issue is not whether we can afford what we spend. The issue is, are we spending enough in order to invest into the basic human capital of competitiveness? Are we spending enough into the infrastructure that underlines the development of an economy? That is sound public finance. If you underinvest, you're going to get low economic growth. That is what we understand under sound public finance. And austerity, although, you know, the word austerity might not appear, everybody's doing austerity. So I can think of plenty of things in the world which no one mentions, but everybody does. Austerity is just one of them. Basically, all over Europe, austerity has been imposed in the last 4 or 5 years in the European Union. It's become basically the rule. This has to do with the economic governance of the EU, and especially the role played by Germany in this economic governance of Germany. And austerity has diminished demand in the economy. I think the European Union, especially the Eurozone, is suffering from a massive lack of demand. In an environment when interest rates are quasi zero, close to zero, it would be very logical to borrow. So we could afford what we should spend because it's almost costless to borrow. Now, the fact that it almost costs less to borrow and we underinvest in infrastructure, we underinvest in human capital, is a massive failure on the part of the EU. If you communitize economic governance as it is today, which basically rules out even mild Keynesian policies, and we saw that in Greece in 2015, what the Syriza government wanted to do in Greece was not a far left-wing program. Far left-wing programs usually are about nationalization, it's about 5-year plans, it's about leaving the Eurozone. What the Syriza government wanted to do in Greece was a mild left-wing Keynesian policy. That was ruled out by the Eurozone, and it's being ruled out almost everywhere in Europe. If you don't have stimulus, if you don't have demand, the Eurozone countries are going to keep on suffering. We have not fixed the structural problems of the Eurozone. The Eurozone suffers from deep structural problems. It has to do with it not being an optimal currency area. You cannot have the right appropriate interest rate for a currency area which is not optimal. It suffers from having no wage policy. Basically, Germany benefited massively from the Eurozone because it lowered its wage share within GDP and basically outcompeted countries, not on a basis of productivity growth, but on a basis of lower and lower wages within the GDP. And that has ruined much of the Eurozone economy. Why are people moving from Eurozone countries to Britain? Why are they not moving to Eurozone countries? The reason is because Britain did not have austerity. There's a lot of Greeks, Italians, Spaniards moving to the UK because there is effective demand in the UK economy, which is not there in the Eurozone economy. So I think we have serious structural problems still with the Eurozone. We haven't fixed these problems. Instead, we have depleted the demand, and that is not sound public finance. Underinvestment in infrastructure hinders competitiveness, and that is not sound public finance. On the issue of TTIP and CETA, there are a lot of downsides for TTIP and CETA. Everybody knows what the downsides are. These are very much present in the public media. What are the upsides for TTIP and CETA? There are 3 studies done on TTIP. 2 of the studies were commissioned by the European Commission, so you cannot really call them independent studies, because if the European Commission is definitely for TTIP and it sponsors a study, I would not call that an independent study. Nevertheless, these studies commissioned by the European Commission actually talk of a very, very minor positive effect. So over something like 10 years, there would be a positive growth effect of something like 0.4% of GDP. Not on an annual basis, but overall. Over 10 years, 0.4% overall GDP growth. That's the study commissioned by the European Commission. There's another 3rd study, which is an independent study done by Professor Jeren and Capaldo of Tufts University in the United States, which is the only independent study of TTIP that I know of, which actually talks of a minor negative effect. So the studies, the academic studies that have been done of TTIP range from minor negative to minor positive in terms of GDP and similar in terms of employment effects. So if you accept empirical economic analysis, TTIP is not going to save the Eurozone and it's not going to save the European Union. In sharp contrast to the communication of the European Commission, TTIP will not have a significant effect on the European economy economically. It will have a massively significant effect on the democracy of the European Union if something like TTIP goes through the way it was being discussed and the way that the negotiations were secretive and the way that partners who will be affected by TTIP have not been and will not be consulted. Imagine TTIP going into effect. Imagine the affected parties suddenly understanding the effects of it. Imagine the public outrage if they learn about the actual effects of TTIP. What is going to happen then? Are we going to renegotiate TTIP? Are we going to renegotiate it again in secret, or are we going to renegotiate it this time openly? If we do it a second time openly, why couldn't we do it again in the first instance? If we do it again secretly, how is that going to be different from how we did it the first time? So massive negative effects, minute positive effects, that's TTIP, a country which can be characterized by the German model of the 1950s and the 60s. It has become a rather neoliberal country, much more similar to the 1980s United Kingdom. The economics literature talks about a model for Central and Eastern Europe, and this model is called in the economics literature the FDI, Foreign Direct Investment Dependent Competition State. That's what economists call it now, the Foreign Direct Investment Dependent Competition State. What does that mean? This means that whereas other parts of Europe have their own corporations, have their own large transnational enterprises, which are active all over the EU and beyond, Central and Eastern European countries have relied in the last 25 years on foreign direct investment, mostly from Germany, also from Austria, Netherlands, UK, Italy, etc., etc. Very, very few domestic companies, very, very few corporations that are large enough to expand beyond our borders, and especially very few companies which have high value-added products which they can export. So most of our industry, most of our economy is actually characterized by foreign direct investments, of which we have gained the low value-added end. So we are low value-added producers of mostly German and Austrian transnational companies, which in fact results in low wages. So with low value-added production, you basically end up with low wages and a lower employment rate. That's not true of the Czech Republic, but apart from the Czech Republic, every other Eastern European country has much lower employment rates. And as far as the wages are concerned, that's even true of the Czech Republic, that we have far lower wages because of the lower productivity. How do you get rid of it? How do you change from this model, which is not leading to convergence? In the mainstream discussions, you often hear about how the Czech Republic has overtaken Portugal, how Slovakia has overtaken Greece, etc., etc. That might be true in terms of GDP per capita, but if you look at living standards, that's definitely not true. So even at the height of their biggest economic crisis, the Mediterranean countries have a higher standard of living than do the forerunners of the FDI-based model in Central and Eastern Europe. There is no convergence. If you look at wage differentials, if you look at the difference between Northwestern European wages and Central Eastern European wages, there is no closing of the differential. There is a slow, gradual widening of the wage differential. This model is not sustainable. How do you change this model? You change this model by investment into the human capital of the country. You change it by much more investment, much larger investment into education, into research development. All of our countries are falling behind in terms of investment into human capital, into public infrastructure, and creating local companies, domestically owned companies, which can export, which are based on higher value added, and therefore closing the gap with Western European countries. That is very difficult to do in a regime in an economic regime which is characterized by austerity. Austerity prevents you exactly from that investment into human capital, and that, I do not think, is sound public finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoltán. I have also an additional question to your presentation. Is policies which are now done in Hungary and Poland, are they going to the right direction in terms of solving this problem of convergence and creating growth and domestic champions?
No, I don't think they're going in the right direction. Neither of these countries has increased its expenditure on education. Neither of these countries, there is somewhat of an increase in Hungary on investment in research and development, but it's still far below what we would actually need. But Hungary has actually decreased its expenditure on education radically, and it's one of the lowest investors at the moment. So 6 years ago, we used to have about 5% of our GDP invested in education, which is inadequate because the EU average is somewhere around 6%, so even 5% would be too little. Now Hungary is investing about something like 3.8%, which is the lowest in the OECD. So it's not a sustainable solution to these problems. No.
Thank you. So Czech Republic looks better a little bit, Zdeněk? No?
It probably does somewhat compared to Hungary and Poland. But anyway, when we discuss these economic models, I just wanted to throw in one kind of disclaimer, also reflecting on the title of the panel, because we are talking about Germany and Visegrad in the troubled time, and the troubled time really comes from troubled politics. That we are talking here about economic relationships where one can talk about win-win solutions and think in rational and measurable terms. However, we cannot really ignore that all this debate is taking place in the context of increasingly irrational identity-based politics of populist parties that can easily disrupt any of the economic arrangements that to decent observers sound as very logical, but we may end up soon in Austria with a populist president. We've seen the populist party rising for the first time since the Second World War in Germany. So always when we talk about what would be a smart policy, you have to be aware that this kind of logic is no longer taken for granted, and things that just about any economist would interpret as shooting one's own feet may happen because of that. So I just thought about throwing this in as a kind of disclaimer onto the debate. As we've seen, Matthias and Zoltán probably wouldn't agree on the policy content, but I think I would probably side here with Matthias on the sense that the Visegrad countries that are not in the Eurozone can disagree with German policies, but that's exactly what we can do. We have to reflect the fact that it's the elephant in the China shop on which our economies are very dependent, as Zoltán described it, this FDI-dependent model. We are structurally very integrated, so really the ball is on in the court of the Visegrad countries, simply to learn to live with this. And if you look at the surrounding countries that learn to live with the Germans, so to say, then Austria is probably the best example, because they have a common currency since 1979 de facto, long before the euro was introduced. And when you look how the Austrian economy functions, well, you actually find out that there's hardly any economic discussion in Austria, because it's all decided in Germany. They have kind of an automated formula that is kind of Germany light. When the German central bank, or now the European central bank, takes some decision, the Austrian system simply adapts, because for them it's the fundamental precondition for the prosperity is not to lose the competitiveness vis-à-vis the Germans or the German economy. So, and they've developed all the institutions, political and economic, to make sure that this competitiveness is not lost. And they basically done it by mimicking the German structure. I mean, the roots of the structure were actually in the same economic history. So it was rather easy. However, for the Visegrad countries, this is probably not quite possible, because the institutions like the wage bargaining and some of that Zoltán mentioned here, the industry level wage bargaining and the representation of employers and employees and strong tripartite and strong social dialogue, which is done in an intelligent way in order to preserve the competitiveness of the whole economy. That's difficult to imagine developing in the current historical context, with the decline of the trade union, with the specific feature that much of the Visegrad economy is actually not domestic in a sense. It's in a political sense, the foreign direct investors, they are not on the same boat as the voters and as the citizens of the countries. You know, they are concerned about their investments not being disrupted or threatened in any way, but they don't really care about the rest of the country, whether it's going to work or fall apart. That's pretty much beyond them. So it's very difficult to imagine that these political economy institutions that serve so well for Austria could develop in the Visegrad countries. So, as I said, the ball is really on our side to transfer the existing economic model in something that could work in this context. And I also mentioned that the only thing we can do is to disagree with the German economic principles unless we are in the Eurozone. Because the Eurozone, some kind of reformed Eurozone that has more complete institutional architecture than the version of 1992, when the design was done in the Maastricht Treaty. It could help the Visegrad countries to figure out a model how to live with the German economy in their neighborhood, because it could provide some of the coordination mechanisms that are somehow non-existent and very difficult to imagine in the current situation of the Czech, Polish, Hungarian or Slovak economy, for that matter. So that's probably a suggestion that one way forward would be, to think about joining the Eurozone at some point in time when the reforms are more or less complete. And and the design is not so asymmetric as was before this financial crisis.
Also, additional question maybe to all three of you is, because you're mentioning Eurozone, is Slovakia, as we don't have any Slovak on the panel, so it's upon you, decide, is Slovakia in better or worse or simply different situation than other three before countries vis-a-vis dealing with the German influence in economic terms and in overall European politics?
Shall I start? Well, I mean, we can safely say that joining the euro didn't hurt Slovakia. That's what we know for sure, and so it sort of passes the basic precondition that we know from medicine, that you should never hurt your patient with whatever treatment. So more difficult question is whether it's provided some kind of immediate advantage. I mean, you can come up with examples. For example, one of the major problems for the banking sectors in Visegrad countries were loans denominated in foreign currencies, which is still a major problem for Hungarian and Polish financial sectors, or it is a contested issue rather. They managed to solve it gradually over the last 8 years. But the Slovaks kind of escaped these problems altogether by joining the Eurozone at the right point in time. So you could come up with examples of this type, but for the long term, we don't really know, because Slovakia has joined the Eurozone in the midst of the crisis, which was mitigated by the fact that the German economy wasn't in such a deep crisis as most other Western European economies. So we still don't really know how this Eurozone membership is going to work in the real crisis that will have an impact on the Slovak economy. So I would be prepared to judge it the moment we see a cyclical downside in the car industry, because that will be the real test, whether the euro works for them or not, and whether it's a good idea to have this additional safety valve in terms of the national currency. So the short answer is so far so good, but the jury is still out.
Zoltán?
Yeah, I think something quite similar. If you list the countries which were hurt by the euro, you would have Ireland, Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Greece, Cyprus, Slovenia, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Finland as the list of countries which were hurt by the Eurozone. Why is Slovakia not on this list? I think this is a very interesting question, since Slovakia also joined the Eurozone. And the prime reason is exactly as Zdeněk mentioned, because Slovakia was lucky in joining the Eurozone at a time when the crisis was already happening. Why were the other countries hurt by the Eurozone? Because of the asset price bubbles, which were fueled by the inappropriate interest rates. The interest rates which were set to avoid countries like Germany and France slipping into recession were too low, the nominal interest rates were too low for the countries of the periphery. Where they even had higher inflation rates, so at some points they even had negative real interest rates. So basically the Eurozone interest rates were fueling an asset price bubble on the periphery. This did not happen in Slovakia, primarily because Slovakia happened to join the euro at a later date than these countries. So in this sense it was lucky to escape the negative effects. Whether there are any enormous positive effects, I can't really think of one. I mean, the usual positive effects obviously apply. It's deemed generally to be a sign of stability. It facilitates probably to some degree trade, etc., etc. But I don't think that these effects are enormous. I think if you are to mention one enormously positive effect of one enormously negative effect of being in the Eurozone is that Slovakia had to participate in the bailout of the southern European countries. Being in the Eurozone meant that Slovakia had to contribute to bailing out the Western European banks. Because what we usually call bailing out Greece, or bailing out Portugal, or bailing out Spain, wasn't really bailing out the southern European countries. It was about transferring the bad debt which was held in 2009-2010, the bad debt held by large Western European banks of, for instance, Greek debt, to European stability mechanisms and the European Central Bank. That transfer was being facilitated by taxpayers' money from Eurozone countries such as Slovakia and some of the Baltic states. That caused a huge outrage in Slovakia, because Slovakia is a country where the living standard is still lower more than, for instance, in Greece, and people didn't understand, I think rightfully so, why they have to contribute to bailing out a country where the living standards are higher, and why they have to contribute especially to 3 memoranda in Greece, which caused Greece not to be resolved, which didn't help Greece, but they actually made the Greek situation worse. So memorandum after memorandum after memorandum, the Greek situation became worse and worse and worse, and Slovak taxpayers had to contribute to financing that transfer of bad debt from big European banks to the ECB, while crippling the ability of the Greek economy to create wealth and ever repay that debt. Greece is in a worse and worse situation to repay that debt. The likelihood that that debt will be repaid, I think everybody agrees, is very, very minute. And Slovak citizens had to contribute to that endless, bottomless pit, which I think is not very positive.
Matthias, view from the Berlin?
Well, actually, I would be very reluctant in saying that a country and its economy have been hit by the euro. I do think that, and I'm convinced that people in our countries are more hit by good or bad economic and social policies and not by a common currency. I think there is a certain rationality that having a common single market can lead as well, crowned by a common single currency, and this is a point where we have to see that there are still deficits that has to be added by a common economic policy in a way. So there are, from my point of view, still points to be done, and the reforms of the last 5 years showed up a certain political will that more common instruments, more common solidarity. It's not only the Slovakian people that had to bring in something for the bailout, but actually every member state in the Eurozone has to bring something on the table as guarantees or credits for the situation of public debt in other member states. So as it has been said, deeply concerns in Germany as well. I would agree that the German economy profits from a undervalued euro. On the other hand, Germans now see that actually they have to bring something on the table in these instruments of the mechanisms of stability and the guarantees for public debts that from other member states of the Eurozone. So from my point of view, the core point is, before you think about whether you will become a part of this Eurozone club, are you prepared from an economic point of view, but as well from a political point of view, meaning are your publics prepared of taking over the regime and the rules and regulations which are, for instance, which are now functioning within the Eurozone area. And this is a political, the Euro has always been more than just an economic project. It has always been a political project that makes it, from an academic economic point of view, that makes it vulnerable, because it has been as well a political project, and this has to be. We have to think about this when there is a debate whether a Visegrad country should join the Eurozone or not.
Thank you. I can now open the debate and the questions from the audience. Please identify yourself if you start, if you put a question. Is there anybody, or should I continue with my list of 158 questions? Please.
I'm sorry, I'm not as... Okay.
My name is Zdeněk, I'm from the Polish Embassy. My question is towards the economic development, as we have in the topic that the Visegrad and the Germany and the future. Once those economies are related also with a certain globalization, and maybe not in global. I don't want to touch the US and TTIP as you mentioned, but definitely to a certain extent we should count in those aspects the economy and development of Russia and the Eastern market. So could you elaborate to what extent that development would be linked to our future economic security in this region, especially having a German as a leading nation in economy in Europe? This is notwithstanding the truth and the common volume. And also the economy, as you mentioned, on the Eastern Europe, which is gradually dependent on the foreign investments, but definitely with the ability to increase the potential. Thank you.
Well, I think if I said that we are dependent on Germany in terms of our economic structure, we are to varying degrees, but dependent on Russia on our energy sector. So the strongest connection between our countries and Russia is obviously in the energy sector. Obviously it varies, so some countries are more dependent than others. Some countries are extremely dependent on Russia, and incidentally, some countries are even trying to increase that unilateral dependence on Russia, which I think is very worrying, because if I said that it's not sustainable to be one-sidedly dependent on the German economy for our economic structure, it's equally not sustainable to be unilaterally dependent on the Russian economy for sources of energy. So I would support as much diversification in terms, not only in terms of the forms of energy, the resources, in terms of, what mix of what forms of energy we use, i.e. nuclear, coal, sustainable, renewable, etc., but also in terms of the source countries from where we source. I think it increases the risk of countries to be solely dependent on a single supplier, which in some cases is the case and is also about to increase, I think.
If I may just add non-energy answer to the question. As far as I understand it, you were asking more about this debate that is currently quite active in the Czech Republic, whether we should do some kind of pivot to the east or focus more on economic collaboration with China or Russia. To be honest, I'm not a big believer on that, because it's kind of it's a flirting of a man who has a good and working family and sometimes has to flirt with some other ladies towards the east. That's probably the best comparison, that in a sense that it's a nice add-on, if you want, if you will, but only as long as you don't undermine the fundamental relationship, which makes the economy work, which makes people employed, and which kind of not guarantees, but which propels the very gradual convergence in terms of living standards and wages. So I think the more relevant policy agenda than this redevelopment of the Eastern relations is to focus on strengthening the domestic economy and its capacity to contribute to trade with the developed markets. And Zoltán already has mentioned this idea of investments in infrastructure and education. We could also take the German stress on the small and medium companies, and I would add to this agenda also investment in institutions, because when we think about why the Visegrad entrepreneurs cannot really join the high value-added services, very often we find out that they get the experience from the transnational firms, and they can start their own businesses, but they have to do it in a business environment which is very difficult, which is designed to make it actually more difficult. We have the tax systems that are so complicated there's just no way of handling them on their own. You have the state bureaucracy, which is focused more on creating problems than on solving them. So this is what economists tend to call institutional problems of our own making. It's a kind of a homework that if the Visegrad countries were able to do something about, they would have much better shot at getting the higher value-added services into the Western markets, which are more stable, more predictable. So it's kind of easier to do business with than to try to chase very uncertain Eastern relations. So yeah, that's where I would see the lowest hanging fruit. It's not a pivot to Russia or China. It's a focus on developing the domestic SME sector by making it easy to start business. For those people who have the skills, they probably can get capital. That's not the major obstacle. But in these early years of an SME, they need to be nurtured by the state being in the supporting role rather than hampered in their business development.
Maybe before Matthias will answer, I would add the fresh point that today and tomorrow Vice Chancellor of Germany, Gabriel, is visiting Germany, which always brings little nervous shakes in this region.
He's visiting Russia.
He's visiting Russia, yes. What's the first, do you understand our nervousness first, and second, how do you see this Eastern approach?
Me personally, I do see this awareness here in the region, and I can understand that from your point of view there has been some irritation about when we look back when this decision has been made that actually Germany and the European Union would react with sanctions towards Russia after the Crimea situation. There was a huge part of the German industry saying we have so beautiful businesses with Russia. We don't think that it is so easy for us to cope with the negative results. Nevertheless, the German corporates, after a huge internal debate, said we accept that the political decision, and we do reduce our business activities towards Russia. Coming to the political scene, I mean that it has been already mentioned that in Germany there is right-wing populism coming on the stage, and the interesting thing from that point of view is now the left and the right-wing populists in Germany are quite advocating a very, very rational relation to Russia, because they think, I mean, this has to do with this, on the one hand, this anti-Americanism, and on the other hand, seeing another big partner, perhaps in Russia. So from the left and the right and the parliamentary scheme, there is a certain influence towards the public debate that in Germany we could, in a way as well, overcome this having Russia outside our activities. That makes it, from a political point of view as well, quite tricky, for instance, to debate that these sanctions shall go on. Another point that, as I advocated open markets as well, is, from my point of view, open markets and businesses and doing businesses with Russia could as well, still, from my point of view, but this is a quite theoretical approach, and but I would make the point here, is still a chance to get better experience on both sides of a business in Russia and in the European Union. And my fear is actually, or my hope on the other hand, is could we in a way give some certain idea of the Russian people that actually what are they are following, for instance, is not the only choice, but actually there is a choice for them as well to create more wealth for their people when they open businesses towards the European Union. Nevertheless, I see that from your point of view, this is not an argument here, but for us, an experience has been that reducing barriers of trade and businesses can, in a way, be combined with more political pluralism as well in the midterm perspective. And this has always, these arguments do play a certain role as well when we speak about how to create a role and positions towards Russia, for instance.
We have a question there.
Hello, I'm Ambassador of Lithuania. So I have one question. So a couple of times you mentioned, let's say, discussing about the euro, that it's not only an economical project, but as well the political one. So I can say from my point of view that exactly during our accession to the Eurozone, we saw this project as well as economical and political one. And even though they're speaking about the European Union, let's say, we can all remember that, by the way, European Union got the Nobel Prize for Peace, not for economy. So it should be also perceived as the political project, let's say, the peace project. So, and my question is, when you are discussing, let's say, different models and the possible developments and something like that, and you can see the different types of the discussions between the politicians, between the economists, how to merge those both discussions, let's say, the political one and economical one, into the one, in order to have, let's say, a clear picture about our relations, let's say, towards Russia, towards United States, and let's say inside, and the future of the Eurozone and so on. So, thank you.
So far we didn't mention China. Zdeněk?
So, I mean, it's kind of understandable that we all would like to have everything clear and well lined up, but this is just not how it works, unfortunately. There are complex trade-offs, and probably the best characterization of the evolution of the Eurozone so far, which is part of this balance between economics and politics and so on that you were asking about, is muddling through. It's basically consisting of the minimalist reforms at the last possible moment before something disastrous can happen. And I'm afraid, given the political model that we have in the EU that makes it almost impossible to agree on anything, it will be either continuation of this muddling through, or, and this again can divide Germany from its Visegrad partners, or some kind of internal stratification within the EU, and perhaps even within the Eurozone, meaning that there might be a coalition of willing member states to make few extra steps, but I don't think it will be plausible for all 28 or 27 or even all 19 countries to do that. So if there is a major leap probably under the German leadership into more integration, into building more complete, more institutionally complete Eurozone, it's probably going to be for the core countries without the southern and eastern periphery. And it's not that they would be excluded a priori, but it will be more based on the economic criteria that one needs to fulfill to get to this upgraded Eurozone, which might have better answer, more clear-cut answers than the usual muddling through to the major political and economic questions. But the binding constraint really is an agreement of the 28 countries on anything, on any reform. Everybody agrees the EU needs to reform, you need to respond to one of the zillions of wake-up calls, this referendum, that referendum, and all that. Everybody agrees on this, but the binding constraint is that there is no consensus on the form of the reform. So, and as the pressure is increasing to do something, to clarify this relationship, to say how much is it political project, how much is it economic project, how is it supposed to work, as this pressure is increasing, it creates stronger and stronger motivation for some kind of this internal differentiation of some countries moving forward quicker than the other, which would then mean, again, it's in the big schemes of things, it's again a muddling through strategy in a sense that a subset of countries tries to build something up, and if it works, hopefully the others will be allowed to join in later when they can comply with some of the stricter criteria, political and economic, that would hopefully prevent the major asymmetries that created the Eurozone problems in the first place. So yeah, if there is to be more clarity, I would bet on the internal differentiation.
I understand how originally the Eurozone was conceived to be a political project. Obviously, if you have the common currency in your pocket and you travel all over Europe, it's very convenient. We all experience that. It's symbolically important that we've changed our national currencies and we were ready to adopt a common one. It's a very important symbolic step forward because only states really have currencies. So, you know, to the rest of the world, it was a symbolic kind of representation of the fact that we belong together, and there are very few tangible assets that we can show like this, apart from the flag and etc. But most of European integration is actually so abstract and so far away from the everyday lives of people that it was very useful to have something like the euro in our pockets, which was very tangible. So I understand what the imagination was at the beginning, but unfortunately, a monarchy union has its economics, and the way you set up a monarchy union matters. And although Matthias just said a moment ago that he doesn't believe that a currency union can cripple an economy, I believe that there are very clear ways in which this can take place. I mean, if you have an asset price bubble in an economy which is not part of the Eurozone, we all know how an independent central bank would react. If you have an asset price bubble, the independent central bank would raise interest rates. You cannot raise interest rates in a monarchy union, therefore you are fueling a bubble. I think this is quite elementary economics. There is nothing surprising about it. This, in economic theory, has been around since 1967, when an American economist called Robert Mundell wrote his first piece on optimal and not optimal currency areas. We knew this in 1992 when we were discussing the Eurozone. This was in the debates. We knew the risks that this would entail, and it happened. It took place. And various other problems that I was already mentioned about the Eurozone. And what we have now is that the Eurozone has been detrimental to the political project. For the very large parts of European societies, they think of the Eurozone as a negative thing. Something that had a negative effect on their living standards, that had a negative effect on the way their economies developed, especially in the south of Europe. These are countries which are now burdened with double the debt level that they had before. Ireland, Spain, etc., etc. They have massive levels of debt. If you look at Italian growth was quite stable until the introduction of the Eurozone. It since has leveled off. There is no growth in the Italian economy since the introduction of the euro. And I could go on and on and on and on, ending in the 2015 incident about Greece, where the population of Greece, for the large part, felt that a democratically elected government with a democratically elected program was not being implemented because of the curtailment by the Eurogroup. Now, whether or not you agree with this is, obviously this is a matter of debate, but that is how large parts of societies feel about the Eurozone. So I would argue that rather than continuing to be a positive thing that moves forward European integration, the Eurozone is now perceived by at least one half of society, if not by the other, to be a negative thing politically, something that contributed to a two-tier Europe, if not a three-tier Europe. It moved European countries further away from each other, and it led to the biggest debate in European integration since its founding, except for the migration debate, which is probably even bigger than the Eurozone debate. But until the migration debate began, the biggest debate was about the resolution of the Eurozone. So, in effect, it probably had a negative effect on our political union and about our common goals, and not a positive one, unfortunately, which I'm very sorry about.
I'd like to come back to this muddling through idea. Perhaps muddling through is a little bit of a negative connotation. I would say that actually with the European Union's idea of finding compromises even on the last debate, that could be a model that contrasts towards other, for instance, getting more and more influence models all over the world, speaking about more authoritarian models like Russia, like China, like perhaps the US with Donald Trump going more into this direction as well. So I would underline these fruits of the European Union and the European lesson, and as well the political and historical lesson of the European integration, that it is, even when there are always negative impacts, it is a model in which member countries found a way of balancing out the meaning of finding a compromise in certain issues they would like to share. And when we say that the common currency has been a topic which we would like to share, we decided this on a political level. Perhaps we can see that these macroeconomic developments that you described, they occurred then in this regime when we do not see that we will find a way out of it. For example, a political union at the end of the day, a common economic government, which, for instance, would not find a majority in Germany, I suppose. But nevertheless, then it should be as well feasible to rethink these common projects as well, when we take for serious that a part of our population doesn't see the positive but the negative impacts. I agree with this, because this is politics, to reflect on how my projects are seen in the population. And when I cannot explain the original idea anymore that I put into a project, I should be prepared just to get a step back. And this, from my point of view, could be as well an philosophy for a further a process of the upcoming European Union. We have this picture of the bicycle that has to go on and on and on, because when it stops, it will turn down, fall. But we should know where we want to go with our bicycle. It's not only that you have an underlying process of energy, but you have to see what is my common goal. And therefore we should find more inspiration in our debates as well.
Maybe just one more addition when we talk about the success or failure of the Eurozone. It's always too easy to be carried away too far, even in the criticism, because the difficult problem of the social sciences is an experiment where you have the counterfactual. What would have happened without the Eurozone? And we actually know that not having Eurozone would not prevented the financial crisis. Not having Eurozone could make it somewhat easier to sort out the mess, and perhaps the asset bubbles wouldn't be so big, because the usual exchange rate mechanism would kick in earlier. So it wouldn't be such a big problem, and it might be a bit easier to solve. But it wouldn't have prevented the crisis. But we can go even further and maybe try to compare financial crisis in Iceland, which has independent currencies, and Ireland, which doesn't have independent currencies. And now we have 8 years of experience, and you can say that there's probably not a clear winner when you compare these two scenarios. I mean, at some point, it looked like Iceland would be better off. Okay, Icelandic crisis was probably somewhat deeper, so it is a complicated comparison. But what I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't go too far in blaming euro, in saying it was a political project and therefore it's somehow economically illiterate or economically illegitimate. Because when we do the careful comparison, the way to restructure the economies and the banking sectors after the crises, in retrospect, it doesn't look so bad as we feared at certain stage when doing the early comparison of Iceland or Ireland.
Zoltán?
Well, this is a session on Visegrad, and so I don't want to stray too far away towards Ireland or Iceland, but I think looking at the Irish economy is an extremely complicated thing. I started off when I started working at the university, some of the first things I did was on the Irish economy. And the Irish economy is incredibly complicated to look at. I mean, we all know, for instance, last year the Irish economy had a GDP growth rate of, what was it, like 160% or something like this. Like suddenly they found they have, a doubling of the GDP in a single year, officially reported by the Statistical Office. The Irish economists were flabbergasted by why this would happen, and they realized, well, obviously why? Because Ireland is a tax haven. Ireland functions as a tax haven country with sucks away the resources. The current issue with Apple makes it very obvious. So how the Irish economy actually functions, it's a very unique case. I mean, in some sense, every country is unique, obviously, but Ireland and Luxembourg and some of these member states are extremely unique in functioning on it's a different economic model. If Matthias was calling for, identifying economic models such as the Nordic model or the continental one, well, these countries, Malta, Cyprus, probably not any longer, but partially Luxembourg, Ireland, they have a unique economic model which is based on sucking away resources from other member states. So I don't think it's a fair comparison to look at Ireland in this sense. And the Irish GDP, the Irish debt to GDP level, the Irish debt to GDP level has doubled as a consequence. So I will be happy with the resolution of the crisis in Ireland once they have a stable high level of employment, once they have stable job growth, and once they have managed to reduce that debt level back to, let's say, below Maastricht criteria levels. If that happens, then I will be happy without actually sucking away resources from other countries, because we failed to use the crisis to use leverage on the Irish economy to stop functioning in this way. This was another major problem with not utilizing the crisis to actually say to countries like Ireland to discontinue operating to the detriment of other countries.
We got a little bit far away, coffee is waiting. So, gentlemen in the panel, thank you very much for your contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience in our economic seminar, which when we got a little bit far away from Visegrad than we thought originally, but I hope it was useful for all of us. Thank you very much.